I've worked cattle and broke horses for 31 years, and in all that time I learned one thing worth keeping. A person will show you who they are in the first 10 seconds they think nobody's watching. She showed me nothing. That's what stuck with me about her, even before I knew her name. A woman walks up a ranch road with her shoes tied together with twine and her dead in her eyes, and you expect something, a flinch, a plea, a hand held out. She gave us none of it. She stood at our gate like she was the one deciding whether to let us in. We hired her out of pity. I'll say that plain, because it's true and because I'm ashamed of it now. We figured she'd wash dishes and mend shirts and be gone by first snow, the way drifters always are. What none of us figured, not me, not Garrett Voss who signed her on, not a single hand on the half-moon, was that she'd come up that road carrying a secret big enough to break every one of us open. A secret that had a name. A secret that, by the time it was done, would change what I believed a person could survive. So before I tell you what happened the day the black horse nearly killed a man and a stranger walked into the middle of it without slowing her step, let me just say this. Stay with me, because the woman we pitied did not need our pity. She needed the one thing we were all too afraid to give. The black horse had a man's collarbone in his teeth before any of us could get a rope on him. I want you to understand how fast it was. 1 second young Pearl was up on the corral rail, cocky as a barn rooster, telling Hutch he could sit the black for a count of 10 and earn himself $1. Next second the gate was open. I never did learn who opened it, and I've got my suspicions. And the black came out of that pen like something poured out of a bottle, all muscle and no bottom to him, and he hit Pearl while the boy was still laughing. Caught him with his chest first, then took him by the shoulder the way a dog takes a rag. Shook him. Pearl screamed, and I have heard a lot of men scream, and there is a particular pitch a young one hits when the world he thought he understood turns and bites him. It is not a sound you forget. We were all running by then. Garrett with a lariat, Hutch swinging a feed bucket like a fool. Me, I went for the gate, because if that horse got past us into the open yard he'd run for the road and likely take a child with him on the way, since the cook's 2 girls were forever underfoot. The black dropped Pearl in the dust and reared, and his front hooves came down where the boy's head had been a half-breath before, and missed, and cracked the hardpan loud as a pistol. Dust stood up around all of it like the ground itself was smoking. Garrett's rope sailed and the black tossed his head and the loop slid off his ears like water. I remember thinking, very clearly in the cold flat way, a man thinks when things have already gone wrong. We are going to have to shoot him, and we are going to lose a boy doing it. And that is the exact moment the woman walked into the corral. Not ran, walked. Through the open gate into a pen with a killing horse in it, the way you or I might step into a kitchen. I want to be honest about my first thought because it wasn't noble. My first thought was, who is this and how do I get her out before she's dead? I didn't know her. None of us did. She'd come up the road maybe 20 minutes before, and Garrett had left her standing by the cookhouse with a tin cup of coffee while he came to see about the racket, and now here she was in the dirt with us, between the horse and the boy, and she had not so much as set down the cup. "Get out of there," Garrett bellowed at her. His voice cracked on it. Garrett Voss did not crack. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at the black either, not straight on, and that, though I didn't know it yet, was the first true thing she ever taught me. She looked off at the corral post like the horse was the least interesting thing in the county, and she stopped moving. Just stopped. Went still in a way that I have only seen a few times since and never managed to copy myself no matter how I tried. Hutch was still hollering. I was easing along the rail with a rope I had no faith in. The cook's girls were screaming from the porch. And in the middle of all that noise, this ragged little woman stood like a fence post and got smaller. That's the only word for it. She made herself small and quiet and boring. And somehow the stillness of her was louder than all of us put together. The black came down off his rear. His ears swung. He blew hard through his nose, a great wet snort, flecks of foam on the air, and he pawed once, twice, threatening. She let him. She didn't back up and she didn't step in. She set the coffee cup down on the ground, slow, the way you'd set down something you didn't want to spill, and she turned a little sideways to him, and she breathed out long enough that I heard it from 20 feet off. And the horse, God's honest truth, the horse stopped. Not gentled, not won over. I won't dress it up. He stood there blowing and trembling and murderous, but he stopped, like she'd asked him a question he didn't have an answer for. And in those few seconds Hutch got Pearl by the collar and dragged him out under the bottom rail, and I got the gate shut, and the thing was over. She picked her coffee back up. There was dirt floating in it now. She drank it anyway. Pearl had a broke collarbone and 4 cracked ribs and a shoulder chewed down to meat, and he was alive, which by rights he had no business being. We got him into the bunkhouse, and Garrett sent the youngest hand riding for the doctor in 2 forks, a half-day off, and the cook, her name was Ophelia, a wide, kind woman with a temper like a wet cat. She packed the boy's shoulder and cursed steadily in 2 languages the whole while. I came out to the porch after, and the woman was still there, sitting on the bottom step with the empty cup in both hands, looking at nothing. Now I'll tell you what I saw, since I had a moment to look at her proper for the first time. She was younger than I took her for at the gate, under 30, I'd guess, though hardship ages a face and hers had been worked over by it. Thin. Not slim, thin. The thin of someone who's been deciding between supper and tomorrow's supper for a while and choosing tomorrow. Her dress had been a good dress once, brown wool, and somebody had taken care to mend it neat even after there was more mend than dress. Her shoes were tied together at the toe with twine, like I said. Her hands were the part that didn't fit. They were a working woman's hands, scarred and strong, but they were steady. Steadier than mine, and I'd had 30 years of practice. She had a way of holding herself like she expected to be told to leave, and had made her peace with it, and would not give you the satisfaction of seeing it land. "That was a damn fool thing you did," I said. "I meant it kind. It came out wrong, the way most things I mean kind do." She looked up at me, pale eyes, gray or maybe a faded blue, hard to say in that light. "He wasn't going to keep killing," she said. "He was already done. He just didn't know it yet. Horse like that's never done." "That horse," she said, and then she stopped herself. I saw her stop herself. I saw the door close behind her eyes the way you'd see a hand close over a coin. "That horse is scared," she finished. "Scared and mean are cousins. You all keep treating the mean. Nobody said boo to the scared." I didn't know what to make of that. I filed it away. I'm a man who files things away, keep a little tally book in my breast pocket, have for years, where I write down the things that don't sit square, the way some men whittle. I wrote her down later. Widow, walked the black, says he's scared. I didn't have her name yet to put on it. Garrett came out then, wiping his hands on a rag gone red. He was a big man going gray at the temples, a hard man, fair the way hard men are fair, which is to say predictable, which on a ranch counts for more than kindness most days. He'd buried his wife the spring before fever, and there was a meanness in him since that none of us blamed him for, and all of us steered around. He looked at the woman a long moment. "You hungry?" he said. "I'm not asking for charity." "Didn't ask if you were asking. Asked if you were hungry." She held his eye. There was a contest in it I didn't fully follow. Then she said, "Yes." "Ophelia'll feed you. You got somewhere to be." "No. Husband." Something crossed her face fast, whether over a field. "Dead," she said. Garrett nodded like that answered a question he'd been turning over. "I got a cook needs help and a wash house nobody's touched since June. Room's a cot in the back of the cookhouse, nothing finer. $2 a month and you eat what the hands eat. You stay till you don't, and you tell me before you go." He paused. "And you don't go near that horse again. We're putting him down soon, as I find a man'll do it cheap." I watched her hands tighten on that empty cup, just for a second. The knuckles whitened and went back. "All right," she said. "You got a name." "Della." "Della what?" She looked at him, and at me, and back at the dust. and for a moment I thought she wasn't going to answer at all. "Just Della," she said. And Garrett, being Garrett, let it lie. But I wrote it in my book that night with a question mark after it, because in 31 years I'd met all kinds, and a woman who'll give you her first name but guards her last like a wound, that's a woman running from something, or toward it. I didn't know yet which. I didn't know it would turn out to be both. She was a good worker. I'll grant her that, and it cost me nothing to grant it because it was plain to anyone with eyes. The wash house got scrubbed to the boards. Ophelia, who fought with everyone, did not fight with her. They worked the kitchen like two hands of the same person, quiet, passing things without asking. Della mended every torn thing on the place and asked for the next. She kept her head down. She didn't flirt, and she didn't complain, and she didn't cry. And the hands, who'd been ready to make sport of a drifter widow, found there was no purchase in her and left her be. But she watched the black horse. I caught her at it the third day. The black was penned off at the far end of the lot alone because nobody'd go near him, and Garrett wanted him separate till the killing was arranged. I came up over the rise driving in a few strays at dusk, and there she was at the far rail in the blue light, just standing, watching him, not doing anything, not talking to him, not reaching for him. Just watching with that boring stillness of hers. And the black was watching her back, ears forward, and he wasn't pinned to the far corner the way he was for the rest of us. He was standing in the middle of his pen looking at this small, ragged woman like the two of them were having a conversation in a language that didn't need any words. She heard me coming and walked away before I got close, casual, like she just happened to be there. I didn't say anything, but I started watching her the way she watched the horse. And here's what I noticed over the next 2 weeks. The little things, because the little things are always where the truth lives. She never let anyone see her hands when she heard a horse scream. But I saw, once, a colt got tangled in some wire down the draw and squealed, and Della was carrying a wash basket across the yard, and her whole body went still and her fingers spread out wide and stiff, like she was bracing against something, and then she made herself keep walking. She slept badly. Ophelia told me, not meaning to gossip, just talking. The girl cried out in the night sometimes, names Ophelia didn't know. And she could not stop looking toward the road, not the way you'd watch for someone you were waiting for, the way you'd watch for someone you were dreading. I wrote all of it in my book. Della flinches at horses, bad dreams, watches the road. I am not a clever man, but I am a noticing one, and the picture I was building did not fit the woman who stood in front of me sweeping a porch. The thing came to a head over the black. Garrett found his man, a fellow named Crail from over the river, did dirty work cheap and didn't ask why. Word came he'd ride out Sunday with a rifle and put the horse down and haul off the carcass for the dog meat man, and that be the end of it. Garrett told the hands at supper Thursday night, flat, the way he said everything, and went back to his beans. Della stood up from the wash bench by the door where she ate alone, and she said, "Don't." The whole table looked up. She had never once spoken at supper, not a word in 2 weeks. Garrett set down his fork. "Beg pardon." "Don't kill him." Her voice was steady, but I could see what it cost, a vein going in her throat, her bad-shoe foot turned in like a child's. "Give me 30 days. I'll have him gentle enough to ride, or you can shoot him yourself and dock my wages for the feed." A couple of the hands laughed. Garrett didn't. He looked at her the long way he had. "You," he said, "not cruel, just disbelieving. Girl, that horse put a man near in the ground. I got men here been on horseback since they could walk, won't none of them go in that pen. And you want me to believe a washwoman's going to gentle him?" "Yes." "Why?" And there it was. The real question, the one I'd been carrying in my breast pocket for 2 weeks, asked out loud at last by the one man on the place who didn't care about manners. Why? Why does a half-starved widow walk into a killing pen on her first day? Why does she stand at a rail at dusk having silent conversations with a man-eater? Why does she look at that black horse like? Della opened her mouth. and I watched her decide right there in front of all of us whether to tell the truth. "Because I'm good with horses," she said. It was the truth. It just wasn't the whole truth, and I knew it the way you know a coin's a counterfeit by the weight of it in your palm, even before you read the face. Garrett chewed on it. The table was dead quiet. Out in the dark, the black horse banged a hoof against the rail of his pen, once like he was casting a vote. 2 weeks, Garrett said finally. Not 30 days. 2 weeks, and Crail comes Sunday after next instead of this one. You don't get hurt on my place, you get hurt, that's on you. I'll not have it said I let a woman get killed for a horse. And the first time he so much as lays a tooth on you, I shoot him that hour. Those are the terms." "Those are the terms," she said. And she sat back down and finished her beans, and her hand was shaking so hard the spoon rang against the tin, and she ate every bite anyway, because she was a woman who finished what was in front of her, and that was the second true thing she ever taught me. I went down to the pen with her the first morning. Garrett's orders, somebody had to be there so that if the black killed her, there'd be a witness and a man with a rifle. He gave me the rifle. I have never in my life wanted to hold a thing less. It was barely light, cold for the season, frost on the rail, our breath standing out in front of us. The black was in the far corner of his pen, head high, watching us come with the white showing all the way round his eye. Mean and scared cousins, just like she'd said. Della stopped at the gate. She didn't go in. She set down a feed bucket and a coiled lead rope on the ground outside the rail, like she didn't intend to use them, and she leaned her forearms on the top rail and she just stood there. "Aren't you going in?" I said. "No. That's the gentling, standing here. That's the start of it." She didn't look at me. She was looking at the horse, but soft, off to the side of him, never straight on. He's been handled his whole life, roped and snubbed and spurred and beat. Every man that ever touched him came in to make him do something. So that's what he knows a person is, a thing that comes in to make you, comes in to take. She breathed out slow, that long breath. "I'm not going to take anything from him. I'm going to stand here every morning and not want one single thing off him, until he gets curious why." I thought it was the damnedest horse breaking I'd ever heard of. I said so. "It's not breaking," she said, and something came into her voice I hadn't heard before, low and certain and a little bit far away. "Breaking's what they did. You break a horse, you get a horse that obeys you and hates you and's looking for the day. You gentle one," she stopped. "You gentle one and what?" She was quiet a long moment. The frost was melting off the rail under her arms, dark wet lines where her weight pressed. "You gentle one," she said, "and you get a partner, get a thing that die for you and you for it. There's men spend their whole lives and never learn the difference." Her jaw worked. And she stopped again, and this time the door behind her eyes didn't just close, it slammed. "Somebody taught me," she said. "Long time ago, that's all." And the way she said somebody, flat and careful, the way you hold a word that if you held it any softer would cut you, that was the moment I knew. Not the whole of it. But I knew the shape of the thing she was hiding had a person in it. A man, most likely. A man who taught her this, who was somewhere behind that slammed door, and who was, I'd have bet my wages, the dead-in husband dead. I didn't say any of that. I'm not a man who pokes a wound. I just shifted the rifle to my other arm and settled in beside her at the rail, and we stood there in the cold while the light came up, 2 people not wanting a single thing off a horse, and the black in his corner turned one ear toward us. And held it there. That was day 1. By the end of that morning he'd taken 1 step toward her. 1. She about wept over it and hid that too. I went up to the house and Garrett asked me how it went, and I said, "She might be the genuine article, Garrett." And he grunted and said we'd see, and I went and sat in the cookhouse and got out my tally book, and under the line that said Della, ? I wrote a thing I didn't fully understand yet but couldn't shake. I wrote she didn't come here for work. She came here for the horse. And I was right. God help us all, I was right, but I had it backwards, and the backwards of it was the secret. and the secret was so much bigger and sadder and braver than a runaway widow and a man-eating black, that when it finally came out 2 weeks later in the rain, with Crail's wagon already coming up the road, well, by the fourth morning the black would take grain from her hand, and by the sixth he'd let her stand at his shoulder, and on the eighth day a thing happened that I have turned over in my mind every year since. But I have to back up to tell it right, because the change in the horse wasn't the real change. The real change was in her, and it came on so slow that I'd not have caught it without my book to mark the days against. Let me lay it out the way it went. Those first mornings she did exactly what she'd said. She came to the rail and wanted nothing. Some days she didn't bring the bucket at all, just stood with her coffee and her bad shoes in the frost and let the horse decide she was furniture. I came with her every time, Garrett's rifle, Garrett's rule. And I'll tell you I was poor company those first days, because I did not trust that animal 1 inch, and my whole body was strung up tight as fence wire the entire while, waiting for him to come over the rail at her. He never did, and the not doing of it morning after morning did something to me too. I started to breathe a little. I started to watch the way she watched, soft, sideways, patient, and I'll be damned if the world doesn't look different when you look at it that way. Like everything's a horse that's been handled too hard and is just waiting to find out you don't want anything off it. On the third morning she talked to him for the first time. Lo, not commands, I want to be clear, she never once gave that horse an order in all the days I watched. She just talked, the way you'd talk to a person sitting up with you through a bad night. Nonsense mostly. The weather, the color of the light. Once I heard her tell him, very quiet, I know what they did. I know, over and over, and the horse stood with his head dropped low and his eye half closed and his great ribs going slow, and the hair came up on my arms, because she wasn't talking to the horse anymore. I don't think she knew she'd stopped. On the fifth morning, he put his nose against her chest and left it there. She stood so still, both her hands hanging at her sides. She didn't grab at him, didn't pet, didn't do a single thing to spend the moment. Just let his big black nose rest against her sternum, the two of them breathing and her eyes shut, and down her face, one after another, came tears she made no move to wipe. She let them fall the way she let the horse stand. Like wiping them would have been taking something. Like she'd decided a long time ago that the most she'd ever allow herself was to simply not stop a thing from happening. I looked away. A man ought to at a time like that. When I looked back, her face was dry and ordinary and she was coiling the lead rope, and she said, "He's ready for the rope tomorrow," in a voice flat as a board. And we walked up to breakfast and she ate it and washed the dishes, and you'd never in this life have known. That was the 8th day. That's the one I started with. The hands came around slow. It started with Hutch, who'd hauled Pearl out from under the horse and figured, I think, that he had some stake in how it all came out. He took to leaning on the far rail in the mornings to watch. Then a couple of the younger ones, drifting over on their way to chores, pretending they weren't watching. By the second week half, the outfit found reasons to be near the pen at dawn, and there was a quiet over them while they watched her, a kind of churchy quiet that I'd never seen come over that rough crew in all my years. She'd given them something to feel, I think, that they didn't have words for and weren't going to try to find. Men who work cattle live close to the rough end of things, to breaking, to culling, to the bullet that's cheaper than the cure. And here was this little widow proving every morning that there was another way to do it, a slower way, a harder way in truth that asked more of you than a rope and a quirt ever did. And something in them wanted it to be true so bad they could hardly stand to watch. Pearl came down on his feet for the first time on the 10th day, arms strapped to his chest, gray in the face, and stood at the rail and watched the horse that near killed him eat sugar off the widow's flat palm. "Why'd he go for me?" the boy asked her, not angry, just needing to know the way the young need to know. Della considered him. "Because you came at him laughing," she said, "and the last man that laughed near him most likely had a whip in his hand. He didn't see a boy, Pearl, he saw a memory." She tipped her head. Horses don't hold grudges the way we think. They hold fear, forever. They can't talk it out of themselves the way we can, so it just lives in there, and any little thing knocks the lid off it. She turned back to the black. You and him got more in common than you'd like. You both got bit by something once, and decided the whole world was teeth. The boy didn't have anything to say to that. Neither did I. I wrote it in my book that night, every word I could remember, because it didn't sound like horse talk to me. It sounded like a woman describing her own self, and using a horse to do it because looking at it straight on would have killed her. She's not gentling him, I wrote. She's doing it to herself through him. I underlined through him. I don't know why. It felt important, and I've never been sorry I did. The night it broke open was the 11th night, and it was Ophelia who came and got me. I'd taken to sleeping light, the way you do when there's a killing horse on the place and a woman you can't figure. So when the cook shook my shoulder in the dark, I came up fast. She's gone out, Ophelia said, low, scared. To the horse. In the dark, Eli, I heard her go. She's not right tonight. She got a letter. A letter? Ryder brought mail up at supper. Garrett didn't think nothing of it, handed it over. She went white and didn't eat, and now she's gone out to that animal in the pitch black, and you got the rifle. Ophelia's hands were twisting in her apron. Go on, go on. I went, pulled my boots, took up the rifle, went out into a night with no moon to speak of and frost stars hard overhead and my breath loud in my own ears. I could hear her before I could see her, that low talking, the night nurse murmur, broken now in a way it hadn't been in daylight. Broken and wet. I stopped at the corner of the cookhouse, and I did a thing I'm not proud of and have never regretted. I stayed in the dark and I listened, because I'd learned by then that this was a woman who would only ever tell the truth when she thought no one alive could hear it. She was inside the pen, in the dark with him, sitting down in the dirt with her back against the rail and the black standing over her, his head low, and she had the letter crushed in one fist and her other hand flat on the horse's foreleg, and she was talking to him in a voice come all to pieces. Found me, she was saying, after all this. He found where I went, says he's coming for what's his, says, her breath hitched. He means you understand, not me. He never wanted me, not really, I was just the thing that came with, he wants the colt, and you're the colt, you're the last of him, the last living thing my Tamaz ever put his hands to, and that man would put a bullet in your brain just to spite a dead man he hated, just to win, even now, even with Tamaz 3 years cold. I stood in the dark and I did not breathe. I should have let them shoot you, she said, and she was crying now openly, the way she'd never let herself in the light. It would have been kinder. I dragged you across 2 territories in a stolen wagon, and I starved doing it, and I told myself I was saving you, and maybe I just couldn't let go of the last thing he loved. Maybe I'm no better than the man chasing us, holding onto a living creature 'cause of who it reminds me of. Her voice dropped so low I near lost it. Tamaz. Tamaz, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of carrying you in a horse. And the black, that man killer. That animal that put Pearl in the dirt. The black folded his legs and lay down in the cold dirt beside her and put his great head in her lap, and she bent over him and wept into his mane, and I understood the whole of it at last, standing there in the dark with a rifle I'd never have to use. The secret wasn't a secret about a horse. The horse was the secret. The horse was a husband. The horse was a grave she could lead on a rope. The horse was the only piece of a dead man she'd been able to carry out of whatever burned down behind her, and she'd nearly died saving it, and she'd walked into our killing pen on her first day not out of nerve or skill, but because she could not stand by and watch them shoot her husband twice. I went back to bed. I never told her I heard. Some things you carry for a person without ever letting them know you're carrying it, and that's not deceit. That's the closest a clumsy man like me ever gets to grace. But I lay awake till dawn, and I'll tell you what I lay awake on. Not the sadness of it, though it was sad enough. I lay awake on that one word. Coming. He found where I went. He's coming for what's his. There was a man on the road. There'd been a man on the road this whole time. That was the road she watched. the dread I'd written in my book and never understood. And now there was a letter that said he'd found her, and a wagon coming Sunday that wasn't Crail's, or maybe was Crail's and something worse besides, and a black horse in a pen that two different men, for two opposite reasons, wanted dead. I got up before light and found Garrett in the cookhouse drinking coffee in the dark, and I sat down across from him and I said, "Garrett, there's a thing you ought to know about Della, and I only half know it myself." I told him what I could without telling him I'd eavesdropped. That she had history, that there was a man hunting her, that the horse somehow was the heart of it, that whatever she was running from, she'd run toward us carrying it on a lead rope, and we'd taken her and not knowing we'd taken in her trouble too. Garrett listened the way he did everything, still and flat, turning his cup. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a long while. Then he said a thing I didn't expect. "My Alina had a piano," he said. I waited. Couldn't play it worth a damn. Neither could I hauled it out here from Missouri at a cost would have bought 40 acres, and it sat in the front room 3 years going out of tune, and she dusted every day. He turned the cup. She died and I kept dusting it. Near about, every day, couldn't tell you why, couldn't play the thing. He looked up at me, and there was something raw in him I'd not seen since the burying. Then one day I took an axe to it, broke it to kindling and burned it. And I felt better, and I felt like a murderer both, and I've never told a living soul that till right now. He set the cup down. So I know what a woman dragging a horse across 2 territories is. I know exactly what that is. And I'll be damned if I let some man ride onto my place and take an axe to it for her. You don't even know who's coming. No, he stood up, and he was Garrett Voss again, hard and fair and predictable, which on this morning felt like the finest thing a man could be. But I know the horse stays, and I know she stays, and I know that come Sunday, whoever's riding up that road's going to find more men on this place than he counted on. He took his hat off the peg. Get the hands fed. Don't tell her we know. Let her keep her secret long as she can hold it. A person's got a right to that. He paused at the door. And Eli. Yeah. You did right telling me. You usually do. And he went out into the gray, and that was as near to praise as Garrett Voss ever came in the years I knew him, and I sat there in the cold cookhouse oddly close to weeping myself. The horse came gentle on the 13th day. She rode him, bareback, just a rope hackamore she'd braided herself, out in the big pen with the whole outfit lining the rails, and the black that killed, the black that nobody'd touch, carried her around that pen soft as a church pony, ears swiveling back to her, and she sat him with her eyes closed and her bad shoe feet hanging, and her face turned up to the sun like a woman come up out of deep water at last. The hands didn't whoop. That's the thing I remember. A crew like that you'd expect hollering, but they'd watched the whole of it, 2 weeks of dawn cold and quiet, and they understood somehow that this wasn't a thing you whooped at. They took their hats off. Every one of them, without a word passing, took their hats off and held them, like she was riding past in a procession, and I suppose in a way she was. Pearl was crying. He didn't bother to hide it. 16 and broke half to pieces and crying open at a rail, and not one man teased him for it, because there wasn't a dry eye on that fence and we all knew it. She brought the horse to a stop in front of Garrett, slid down, stood with her hand on the black's neck, both of them blowing a little, and she looked up at Garrett and she opened her mouth to say she'd done it, I suppose. To say there, he's gentle, you needn't shoot him, and maybe to start at last to tell the rest, now that the horse was safe. And that's when the boy came up the road at a dead run, the youngest one, the one we'd sent for the doctor and other errands, riding like the devil was on him, and he came off his horse before it stopped, and he hollered the thing that ended the quiet for good. "Rider coming up the south road, Garrett, it's a man and 3 others, and they're armed, and the one in front," he stopped me on the road and asked. The boy gulped air. He asked, was there a woman here? "Brown dress, travels with a black horse," said her name. "Don't," Della said. But the boy, white and scared and not knowing, said it anyway. He said her name's Adelina Reyes, and she's a thief, and she's got something of his, and he's come to take it back. And the whole world went quiet, and Della Adelina stood there with her hand on the black horse's neck, and I watched 2 weeks of careful, hard-won peace fall off her face like frost off a melting rail, and underneath it was the thing she'd been hiding under the thing she'd been hiding. Not grief. Fear, pure and old and bottomless. She looked at Garrett. She looked at all of us, the hats still half lowered, the crew that had taken theirs off for her, and her voice when it came was very small and very steady, the steadiness of a person who has been afraid so long it's become a kind of calm. "You should have shot the horse," she said. "It would have been kinder. Now they'll do it in front of you." It rained the day they came, which I have always thought was the land's idea of a joke, because Crail's wagon was due that same Sunday, and now there were two kinds of death coming up two different roads in the wet, and the only living thing either of them wanted was a horse standing gentle in a pen for the first time in his life. I want to tell this part slow, because it went fast, and the things that go fast are the ones you owe the most care to in the telling. They came up the south road 4 abreast and reined in at the gate, rain coming down steady, not hard, the kind that soaks you patient. The man in front sat a good blood bay and wore a coat too fine for the country, and even from across the yard you could see the thing in how he sat, a man used to being the most dangerous one anywhere he stopped, and right about it most times. The 3 behind him were hired iron. You can tell. They've got a way of holding still that's all waiting and no peace. Garrett walked out to meet them. Just Garrett, hat dripping, hands empty and loose at his sides. But he hadn't gone out alone, not really. Up along the bunkhouse wall, easy like men who just happened to be cleaning rifles, stood the outfit. Hutch, Pearl with his good arm and a shotgun laid across it. The young ones. Me at the corner of the cookhouse with Garrett's rifle, the one I'd carried 2 weeks for a horse and now carried for a woman. We didn't point anything. We just were there, all of us. The way she'd taught the horse to just be there, quiet, and meaning something by the quiet. The fine-coated man looked it all over, counted us, smiled like it didn't signify. "I'm looking for my property," he said, pleasant. "A horse, black stud, 3 rising 4, white off hind sock, stolen from my place in the territory by a woman calls herself a lot of things. I've papers." He patted his coat. "All legal. I only want what's mine. No call for anybody's powder to get wet over a horse." "No horse here belongs to you," Garrett said. "The papers say different." "Papers?" Garrett let the rain run off his hat brim a moment. "Mister, I had a man through here last spring with papers, said he owned half this valley. We buried him by the creek with his papers in his pocket, since he had no further use for either. He said it flat, no heat. What's your name?" "Vane," the man said. "Aaron Vane, and I'll have my horse, mister." "Voss," Garrett didn't offer a hand. "Vane, and what's a horse to you that you'd ride 4 men 100 miles in the rain for it? Stud's worth money, sure. Not this much trouble's worth of money, so it's not the horse." He took a step closer, easy. "It's the woman. You don't want the horse back. You want her to not have it. There's a difference, and I know the difference better than most, so don't trouble yourself lying to me about it." I saw it land, just a flicker across Vane's fine face, the flicker of a man who's been seen. And that's when Adelina came out of the cookhouse. I tried to stop her, got a hand on her arm at the door. She looked at it, then at me, and there wasn't anything in her face I could argue with, so I let go. She walked out into the rain in her brown dress and her twine-tied shoes past Garrett, right up close to the gate, closer to Vane than any of us would have liked, and she stopped and looked up at him on his fine bay with the rain running down her face, and she said, "Hello, Aaron." "Adelina." He looked her over and his smile changed, got private, got ugly underneath. "You look poorly. Living rough suits you about as well as I'd have guessed." "You killed Tamaz," she said. Not a question. She said it to the rain as much as to him, said it out loud in front of all of us, and I think she'd been waiting 3 years to say it where men with guns could hear. "You burned us out and you shot him in the yard, and you'd have shot me too, but I took the Colt and I ran. And you've spent 3 years and God knows what money chasing a horse you don't even want, because you can't stand that I got away with one living thing. That's the whole of you. That's all you are." A man who can't bear that someone kept something from him. Vane's jaw tightened. Your husband was a thief and a... My husband, she said, could gentle anything alive. He gentled me, and I was about as wild and bit down as that black when he found me. He never broke a thing in his life. And you, her voice shook now, but she didn't stop. You couldn't make that horse mine for love or money, could you? 3 years. You had him 3 years before I took him, and you never once sat him because everything you ever touched you touched to own it, and there's creatures that'll die before they let themselves be owned. He's one. I'm the other. She reached up slow, the way she did everything with the horse, and she undid the twine that held her collar closed, and she pulled it open enough to show a scar that ran up from her collarbone into the hollow of her throat, old and white and wide. You gave me this, she said, the night I ran, and I've been afraid of you every day since, and I'm standing here telling you I'm done being afraid, and I want you to understand it's not because these men are here, it's because I rode that horse 3 days ago. Her chin came up. You can't gentle a thing while you're still afraid. He taught me that. The horse you couldn't ride taught me the thing that finished my fear of you. There's a joke in there, Aaron. I'd think on it the long ride home. Vane stopped smiling. A man like that, when the smile goes, what's left is the true face, and the true face wasn't fine at all. He looked at the rifles along the wall. He looked at Garrett, who hadn't moved. He did the arithmetic any man does: 4 guns against 8 or 9, in the open, in the rain, over a horse, with a woman who just made him small in front of his own hired men. The arithmetic was bad. He knew it was bad. So he reached for the other thing men like that always reach for, the cruel thing, the thing that costs nothing. Fine, he said, keep him. I'll not lose men over a horse. He gathered his reins, and then lightly, like an afterthought, like a man flicking a card on a table, but understand me, Adelina, a horse can be got at. Tonight, next month, next year. A man rides up some evening you've gone soft and forgot to watch the road, a little lead in his feed, a wire across a dark gate. He smiled again, and it was back and worse. You saved one living thing. You'll spend the rest of your life watching it die slow, waiting for the night I send someone. That's my one thing. You took a horse. I'll take your piece. Seems fair. And he turned the bay to go, and he'd have done it too. He'd have ridden off and left that poison in her to work the rest of her years, and that would have been his victory, not the horse. Never the horse, just the knowing he'd left her afraid again. Here's the morally heavy part. I've told it straight this far, and I'll tell it straight now. Garrett had a clean shot at his back. I saw him not take it. I had one too. We were ranch men, not murderers, and a man riding away is a man you let ride. That's the law of the country and the law in us. And so we stood there in the rain and let Aaron Vane begin to ride off with that last cruelty hanging in the air. And there wasn't a thing any of us could do about it that we could live with after. It was Adelina who did the thing. She walked to the pen, opened the gate, and she led the black horse out into the yard, into the rain, into the open with 4 armed men not 40 feet off, and the whole outfit went rigid because if Vane wanted to put a bullet in that horse, he'd never have a cleaner chance. But she didn't lead him toward Vane. She turned him, and she boosted herself up onto his bare wet back, and she sat him there in the downpour, and she said loud, so it carried, so the hired men heard it and Garrett heard it and the rain couldn't swallow it. You're right, you can get at him any night you like. She gathered the rope hackamore in her steady hands. So I'm giving him away right now, in front of witnesses. Garrett Voss, this horse is yours, not mine. I've got no claim on him and never will again. He's a half-moon horse branded by morning, and there's 9 men here'll swear to it and a county sheriff in 2 Forks that knows Garrett Voss for 30 years and never heard of Aaron Vane. She looked down at Vane and the rain ran off her chin, and she smiled for the first time since I'd known her, a real one, terrible and free. You can't take what's mine to hurt me, Aaron, because nothing's mine anymore. I just gave away the last thing I had. There's nothing left in the world for you to threaten me with. She slid down off the horse, handed Garrett the rope. Her hands were shaking, I saw it. I was close, shaking so hard she could barely uncoil her fingers from the braid, because she was giving away her husband, giving away the grave she'd carried across 2 territories, the last living warmth of the only man who ever gentled her, handing it to another man to save it from a third. And that's the thing about her I've never gotten to the bottom of, the thing I still take out and turn over some nights with my book open and nothing written. She didn't save the horse by holding on. She saved it by letting go. She'd spent 3 years believing love was a rope you never dropped, and she stood in that rain and learned the other thing, the harder thing, the thing Garrett knew when he burned the piano and the thing the Black knew when he stopped killing. That there's a kind of holding on that's really just fear wearing love's coat, and you can set it down, and setting it down doesn't mean you didn't love. It means you finally do. Vane sat his bay a long moment. He'd lost and he knew it, lost in a way he couldn't even put his finger on, because she'd taken the one weapon he had and broken it over her own knee. There's no threatening a person who's already given away everything you could threaten. He'd come 100 miles to make her afraid, and she'd made herself, in front of him, into a woman with nothing left to fear. He rode off in the rain. The 3 guns followed. We watched the South Road a long time after they were gone, the way she'd taught us to watch, and nobody said anything, and the rain came down. She stayed the winter. I'll tell you that much, because you'll want to know, and because it's true. She stayed and worked the wash house and the kitchen, and she rode the Black, Garrett's Black, on paper, but everyone knew out to bring in strays, and the hands learned her quiet way with green colts till half the outfit was gentling instead of breaking, and the Half Moon got a name 3 counties over for turning out the soundest-minded horses in the territory. Pearl heeled crooked in the shoulder and followed her around like a pup and grew up, I heard later, to be the best hand with a frightened animal that part of the country ever produced. He learned it from her. She learned it from a dead man. That's how it goes. That's the only way anything good ever travels, handed down, by people who got it from somebody they lost. Garrett and her, I'll not say more than there was to say, because there wasn't much, and what there was slow, and slow is the only kind worth anything. 2 people who'd both burned a piano in their way. They understood each other across a supper table without a lot of words. Take that for whatever you'll take it. She told me her name herself that spring. Came and found me at the cookhouse with my book, sat down across from me and said, "You knew the horse. You knew the whole of it, didn't you, Eli? You heard me that night." I didn't lie to her. I did. "And you never said," she looked at me a long while, "why?" "Figured it was yours to carry," I said, "or to set down, not mine to do either with." She nodded slow. Then she reached over and turned my book around where it lay open, and she took up my pencil, and under the last line I'd written, which was she let go of the horse to save it, and I'd underlined let go the way I underline things. She wrote 4 words in a hand I didn't expect, a fine schooled hand from some life before the brown dress. She wrote, and it saved her. Then she got up and went out to the horse, the way she did every morning, the way she'd do every morning for years after I'd moved on and lost track and only heard things second-hand. Out to the rail in the early light, to stand with a creature that had killed a man and been a grave and become, somehow, just a horse a woman loved, in the plain way you're allowed to love a thing once you've stopped being afraid to lose it. I keep the book still. I'm an old man now, and most of what's in it is names of people gone, but I kept that page. I take it out. There's one thing I never wrote down, though, and I've thought about why for 30 years and never landed on it. The night before she gave the horse away, the night the letter came and I stood in the dark and heard her call it by her husband's name, I heard one more thing, right at the end, so soft I've never been sure I heard it true.